8:06 here on AM 760 Progressive Talk. There's a question about who is getting hit the hardest in the recession here in Colorado. And there is some evidence that there is a racial disparity in that. And joining us now is the Front Range Economic Strategy Center's Rachel Running. FRESC, it's called, that's its short name, is a nonprofit organization which really focuses in on the economy. They put out a lot of data and analysis about what's going on in our local economy. Rachel, thank you so much for taking the time. And we have a link on our website, sirota.am760.net, to FRESC's new study. Rachel, tell us in the broad strokes what FRESC discovered about how the recession is hitting us here on the Front Range in specific.
Sure, David. Thanks for having me. Our report gives a quick glimpse at some of this new recession, new data that focuses on income and poverty and health insurance. And we basically found three things. So we found overall that the recession made inequalities in our state worse. So 3 points on that. One, African Americans saw about a $10,000 drop in income at the height of the recession. Two, we found that there's really an incredible gap between the rich and the rest of us. And three, overall our children are living in greater poverty than in previous years. But beyond that, children of color are making up a really disproportionate number of children in poverty.
Do we have any theories about why this is, other than to say that that minorities are disproportionately lower on the economic ladder than white folks, and that therefore that long-standing trend means that when things get bad, they get particularly bad for minorities. Is that the case in your mind, or is there something that we are specifically dealing with here on the Front Range that exacerbates that situation?
Well, I think you're hitting the nail on the head a lot in terms of these sort of ongoing trends. When you have a problem, then you hit a recession, the recession's really going to expose a lot of what was already bad. But if you take the case of, African Americans and their income, we were already looking at a really significant difference in the area of median income between whites and blacks. So last year, the median, whites were making about double what blacks were making in the metro area. But when you kind of look at this drop-off, so between 2007 and now, African Americans dropped by $10,000 a year. I think that really speaks to some of the jobs.
These numbers are really, really startling. I mean, I'm reading here from the report that in general, everybody, all included, or we'll just use white folks. White folks, the median household income on the Front Range, $68,000. To estimate in 2009 about $66,600. So certainly a drop, not an insubstantial drop. But then for African Americans on the Front Range, the average or median household income in 2007 $41,000. The estimate in 2000 $31,000. I mean that's a 25% decline in median household income, specifically for African Americans, and I'm not very good at math here, but you've got a much smaller decline among white folks. I mean these are huge numbers. To lose 25% of a household's income in 3 years, these are devastating numbers. What do you think accounts for such a huge drop in income?
Well, if you look at when this happened, so between 2007 and 2008, that's the beginning of the recession. Now, we don't see in the data, the recession hitting hard for most groups early on. But if you look at the industries where African Americans are most likely working, they're more saturated in some of the service and labor-intensive jobs. Those are really the first jobs that get cut in economic hard times. They're not as stable. They don't pay as well, and I think that's a lot of where the problem lies. So it's not so, and I think this is a really important point. It's not that there's necessarily explicit racism. Of course, racism does exist, but these trends are not that there's explicit racism that specific employers are saying, all right, we're gonna lay off specifically African Americans. This is a structural economic problem where
African Americans, in this case, are disproportionately in the types of jobs that are most at risk in a recession.
That's true. Yes, this is not about individual racism, but I mean, I think it really brings to light kind of the institutional. You can call it institutional
racism. Absolutely,
in
yes.
Our society, and I do think it's it's a pretty shocking disparity.
And I of course the next logical question is, what do we do about it? And again, on the line with us is the Front Range Economic Strategy Center's Rachel Running, their new report about giving us a much better detailed picture of how the Front Range is being affected by the recession. What's to be done about this? I mean, if you can stipulate, I mean, there's many. This is a multi-layered problem. There's the recession as a general problem. Then you've got a situation where African Americans and minorities are getting hit the hardest by this. What are the solutions, public policy-wise, to both the general problem and the specific problem?
Yeah, and I kind of look at it in two ways. One is right now. So right now, we at FRESC are really calling for the continuation and extension of unemployment benefits, food assistance, child health care assistance, to really help families through these unprecedented times. Because, the reason, so wages are falling, but, we're seeing a big drop-off because a lot of people are unemployed and long-term unemployed. They're having trouble not just for a few months, but for years trying to find a job, and not for lack of trying. In the longer term, I think we really need to address some of the systemic problems. Wages are just too low. So some of the biggest sectors, our service sector in the Front Range is really a blossoming sector, and that's great if those jobs are livable jobs, if they pay wages that support a family. So we don't want to abolish the service sector. We want to make it great. We want to make those jobs good jobs that people are proud to have and can hold for a number of years, and support the families, send their kids to school, go to college, be able to put a little bit into savings.
So how do you make sure wages in the service sector, if the service sector is the growth sector right now, how do you make sure wages are higher?
Well, that's the tricky part. So I mean, I think that has to do. It's no easy task, but in terms of some solutions, I mean, we need to look at legislation and policy that set floors for wages that are more significant than our minimum wage, and look at other avenues that are really going to, allow employers to be able to kind of pay and keep competitive.
Let me ask you then the political question. And again, on the line with us is Rachel Running of the Front Range Economic Strategy Center. Their report on our website, Sirota.am760.net. It's about racial disparities and how the recession is hitting the Front Range. And my last question for you is a political question. Mm-hmm. Every time a state initiative comes up, whether in the legislature or on the ballot, to help workers, to make sure that wages are higher, to make sure that workers are getting a larger share of the economic gains made in our economy. Every single time that's brought up, the charge of anti-business is rolled out. And we've got a new governor coming in who says that he wants to cut government, that he wants to cut taxes, and that he is most focused on creating a quote-unquote a business climate, a better business climate, which to me, rhetorically, sounds like the beginnings of the argument that any effort, for instance, to raise our minimum wage to a living wage would be considered by his administration. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it starts sounding like the old, well, that's anti-business. What do you think the politics of this moment in Colorado are going to mean for the policy that you think we need to pursue?
Well, you hear that argument a lot, that standards for workers are bad for business. I would argue quite the opposite. They're actually really wonderful for business, and it's a public perception problem. People kind of draw this conclusion really quickly, but if you think about it, if more workers, more residents, more citizens of the state have more money in their pockets, they're going to be able to put those right back into the businesses in the area.
Yeah, it's the Henry Ford principle, right? I mean, if you pay the Henry Ford principle, if you pay your workers a wage, you want to pay them enough so that they can buy your product. That's absolutely true.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is, there are cities and states all across the country that have very robust standards, worker benefits that benefit families in terms of wages and benefits, very progressive laws, and businesses have not fled. I mean, they're not only holding tight, but they're coming in. They're good places. Workers for those businesses want to raise their families there. They're good communities. So, I mean, I think a lot of it is a public education, and it's kind of jumping the hurdle to that barrier.
Well, and I think that's why FRESC's work is just so important, and it's going to be, as you well know, it's a long struggle, it's a long slog. But this report, as an example of many of the things that FRESC does, is a good way to continue trying to educate the public about what is really happening in the economy and what it is all about. We have a link to this report on our website, sirota.am760.net. The numbers are really staggering, both in terms of the general numbers, how the recession is hitting the Front Range, and in specific how there really is a serious racial disparity in how some of those consequences are affecting different communities here. Rachel Running is with FRESC. Rachel, thanks so much for taking the time this morning.
I really appreciate it. Have a great day, David.
You too.